Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Future of Law is Today, the podcast bringing you straight talk on law, legal tech, and where the profession is going. I'm your host, Ceskino, and we're cutting through the hype to talk about what's changing in this field and what still needs to. Today's guest is James Teare, founder of Teare 1, a consultancy and tech marketplace helping law firms identify, adopt, and govern legal technology and AI in a sustainable, responsible manner. James is also a partner at Bexley Beaumont, a London and Manchester-based law firm that has won awards for its hybrid model of traditional legal service and consultancy mindset. James began his legal career in tech, working on issues related to data centers, internet infrastructure, and e-commerce. He's held senior in-house roles and advised firms on IP, licensing, digital content, and software. With Teare 1, James has turned his attention to how legal tech and AI should be procured, deployed, and governed, always with an eye on individual rights, fairness, data protection, and ethical rollout. Whether you're curious about how law firms can navigate tech adoption, what real AI use cases look like in law, or how to reach and deliver tech-enabled services to lawyers without losing the human touch, James brings a rare combination of legal, tech, and leadership insight. All right, so James, very happy to have you with us today. Please tell us a bit about your professional journey.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. I've been a practicing solicitor for 25 years in England and Wales. For most of that period of time, I've been working in internet infrastructure, be that data centers or even subsea cabling. And then latterly, in the last 10 years or so, more on the software side of things. Some of that has been developing my own apps, and some of it has been in private practice, and some of it has been in-house in in-house legal teams. The last in-house role I did, I was a reviewer at a small team, and we reviewed AI products that were for repeatable use. And that was quite an exciting time to be doing that sort of thing, because it's when ChatGPT burst onto the scene. Now I'm back in private practice. I continue to advise people as a lawyer. And I also work as a consultant with a business that curates legal tech applications and solutions, reviews them, checks them for due diligence, for legal due diligence, for ownership, for technical sense checks, before they are resold on to individual law firms that might not have that level of expertise within their business.
Great, thank you. So James, something we've talked about is that there's this trust gap and communication gap between legal tech vendors and the legal teams and professionals they're trying to reach. So where does that trust gap come from?
I think from the legal team's perspective, a lot of it is from legacy experiences, their experiences with legacy systems. It's interruptions from adopting new systems. It is difficulty with new systems where it doesn't necessarily perform as well as perhaps was promised. And it's complexity, I think, as well. So we talk about complexity in terms of integration. That's one thing, and that can potentially give you a headache as a user, because you could be without your system. You don't know how long it's going to be down. You don't know how long the transition is going to take. You also have it from a practical perspective of the lawyer. Individual lawyer is looking at a system that promises to do all sorts of different things, can be quite complicated, and as a result can take quite a long time to learn its way around. So that legal team is learning its way around a particular solution. Often they're the contract lifecycle management solution or a case management solution that tries to do everything for every different practice area, leading to a level of complexity that requires a lot of the lawyer. You're asking them to learn your software, to learn why you set it up the way you set it up, rather than putting the conversation the other way around and saying, what is it you need from us? Where are your pain points? Where are your difficulties? How do we make this work for you? Now, you've adopted a system like that as a lawyer. You've learn all of these different mechanisms within the software to get around to what you want to do. Often you've cheated and found some workarounds of your own as well. And then it gets updated or upgraded, and you have to relearn it. That's the sort of legacy problem that creates a suspicion of new technology. And I think that's a big issue with the communication between lawyers and tech providers, is understanding we're not reluctant to take on tech. We're quite inquisitive and we're quite curious about what tech there is out there that will improve our practices.
Yeah.
We're cautious from a compliance perspective. We're cautious that we are using suppliers that can be relied upon, but we are not tech resistant. We really are actually very heavy users of tech as it is already. So we're definitely not tech resistant. We're just very cautious in terms of, are you going to give us a headache or are you going to solve a problem for us? So I have that in mind whenever I'm talking to a vendor. I need something particularly clear from them in terms of what it is that their product does.
Mm-hmm.
Is the user interface really straightforward so that there are minimal barriers to adoption for the lawyer? Are there things that you've even used in your interface, things that make sense to a lawyer to see? I go through each of the products that I review and look at the names that they've put on buttons within the user interface and say to them, why have you called it that? That's not intuitive. And actually get them to change some things in some respect and make it clearer before it goes through to a customer, because these little points of feedback from the lawyers don't always make it into the final version that comes out to market.
Mm-hmm.
And it should have happened along the way, but there's still always something to pick up early in the iterations of the first versions of tech that come to market. I think if you then kind of add to that global issue with legacy systems, with barriers to adoption through negative experiences perhaps, and you try and look towards new solutions, those new solutions, as I say, they have to be very clear. They have to be concentrating on the lawyer's pain points and not the global view of everything we can make AI do for lawyers. And I think, this goes back to the point that a lot of people are making at the moment is, do you go big or do you go niche? Personally, I think niche is an easier sell. It's easier to understand. It's easier to adopt. If you go big with the all-encompassing solution, you're asking lawyers to come to you and say, I want your product because I want to do this with it. But actually, lawyers are not going to do that. They're not going to find a use for your product for you. You have to explain that to them. You have to be really clear what your product is for and how it's going to make their life easier. And when you say make life easier, you need a very clear value proposition. And I think when I have been at conferences over the last few months in particular, very fresh in my mind, I was at one last week, getting clarity of pricing and clarity of purpose and of value from vendors is really challenging. If you're looking for a solution and you've got a pretty good idea of what solution you need, but you don't get answers to those three questions, then you're going to walk away wondering what on earth you went to the conference for, because you don't come away with any more clarity as to what the market, this fragmented market, is actually got to offer you.
Yeah, I mean, you raised a bunch of fantastic points. There's user design, there's complexity, there's honesty about complexity and the ease of adoption, the ease of implementation. There's the question of reliability. So I'll start with the reliability point because I think that's a huge one. In many industries, and certainly in tech, people will look at something like, oh, this works really well 90% of the time. That's fantastic. It's super fast and it works 9 times out of 10 or even 95% of the time. But when you're a lawyer, that doesn't sound so great because you're looking at that 5 to 10% of the time when it doesn't work, and that can make or break a case, a contract, a career. I've been having a lot of conversations about that, yeah, to your point, there's lots of curiosity about tech. And if somebody can make tech that reliably helps lawyers do their jobs more effectively and sure, more efficiently, that's great. But the top concern is not just speed. There's also the concern of, is it accurate? Is it something I can depend on? Can my clients or my employer, if I'm in-house, can they depend on the outputs I'm generating using this?
Yeah, yeah, that's absolutely right. I'm just, as you were speaking, I was thinking of Asahi, not because I'm in need of a beer right now, but Asahi beer is in having a lot of problems in Japan at the moment because they were hacked.
Mm,
Their systems are offline and people have gone back to manual ordering. So there are shortages all over the place. And they're plugging the gap by placing orders using fax. Now, right at the outset of my career, when I was a trainee, we were still using faxes, and faxes would come in and print and print and print all night. And you'd come into the office with a huge spool of paper that was all over the room and needed to be cut from the roll and organized into a document to be reviewed or signed. It's that sort of nightmare that lawyers are afraid of. It's the, oh my word, if we adopt this tech and we put all of our eggs in one basket, do we have to keep the fax machine just in case? Do we have to go and find a fax machine if you can even get one these days? So, yeah, for sure, reliability and resilience are things that I think lawyers are going to be looking at more and more. I think everybody's going to be looking at that more and more because we are seeing at the present time in the UK, we've seen Jaguar Land Rover hacked. They've been out of operation. The government's had to step in and save some of their suppliers who would have gone out of business without government support.
mm, yeah.
We've had Marks and Spencer's, one of our biggest retailers, hacked and offline for all of its online sales for weeks on end. Just in the last few hours, we've had a massive problem with Amazon Web Services. That's meant an awful lot of apps that depend upon Amazon Web Services have gone offline too. So if your tech isn't resilient, this goes back to my background in data centers. Data centers have diverse feeds into the data center. They have multiple different power sources. You've got your main power supply from the grid, which you're going to have diverse feeds. You've got battery backup for blips, short blips of power supply, and then you've got diesel generators on premise too, should you need that too.
Mm-hmm.
You've got multiple feeds into a data center in terms of fiber and connectivity. And we undermine all of that by putting all of our eggs in one basket with a supplier, with a tech supplier. So the more resilience we see from tech suppliers, the more comfortable we should be, anybody should be as a customer. If you are based solely on one cloud solution, you have to explain what's going to happen if that cloud solution fails in the way that we've just seen it fail today.
Yeah. That point about data centers is great because I think so many people right now are looking at, there's this whole trend with vibe coding and anybody can come up with what seems like a good solution or at least a viable prototype over a weekend. But there's so much more to developing and delivering an enterprise grade application, and not just for Fortune 500s, but really even if you're serving law firms with 5 people in them. Is it reliable? Are you building in that redundancy? Do you understand what goes into securing an application that you're making available on the internet? What I hear is that there needs to be a mindset change where it can't just be somebody saying, okay, I have this issue and I'm going to put together a really simple workflow or an AI assistant that helps with that one thing. It has to be some more attention paid to some of that stuff that's not so exciting. Like, are you building in the redundancy? Are you making sure that you can guarantee that 99.99% uptime or whatever, the exact number is? And I think a lot of people approaching it as founders, they're looking at the part about how can I fix hallucinations, or some of them hopefully are at least plugging into real workflows. Like you said, they're not just putting together an assistant and then hoping the lawyers will find the use cases. They're actually finding, and that's a whole own can of worms. But then beyond that, are we really packaging this in a way that people can depend on it? They know that at 8 a.m. or 12 midnight or 5:30 a.m. on a Sunday, it's still going to work just as well as it does at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday.
Yeah. And that has a knock-on effect in terms of other things that you would look at from a tech provider. So it's, if I'm happy that the solution itself is compliant, it's secure, it's resilient, am I happy that the company behind it is also reliable as a partner? We have to look at whether or not the company that's developing software will be in place itself in a year's time. If the solution is great, but the owners lose interest in it or couldn't sell it, And that was their original aim, was just to sell the whole thing as soon as they got enough clients on board. If they stop funding it because their business model wasn't really accurate and therefore they have to pull functionality that they can no longer afford, all of these things are just as important as the technical solution. It's the reliability of that partner behind the scenes as well.
Yeah, again, fantastic perspective. People focus so much on AI hallucinations and user interfaces and whatnot, and that's important. But do you have the infrastructure, and not just the technical infrastructure, do you have the business foundation where your users can trust? Like you said, will you be around a year from now? When you're looking at how you're financing or getting outside capital at all, are you bootstrapping? Because I've been talking with several founders who have taken the bootstrapping path, and maybe they don't have the biggest war chest, so to speak, in terms of being able to advertise and promote and sponsor events, but they do have tech that works, and they've been in business for a while, and they have happy customers who know they can count on this solution.
Yeah, track record's a key indicator. So that's a brilliant factor in the general kind of review of a tech product. But also, you have to acknowledge that an awful lot of companies are startups and don't have a huge track record to fall back on. So what else do you look at? You look at things like what standards are they accredited to, or what attestations do they make as to what standards they adhere to? Are their suppliers SOC 2 attested? Are they accredited to ISOs? Are they relevant ISOs? Are they the right ones? And it's a tricky balance because, as you say, some of these guys are running bootstrapped operation and they haven't got the time or money to get the accreditations in place. They might be working to the same standards as the accreditations. So you have to get to the bottom of, well, okay, you don't have the ISOs, you don't have the attestations that we might have expected. What do you have? How are you addressing this if you're not sitting with the expensive accreditation at the moment? How do you give us the comfort that you're doing all of these things in a compliant way to the best standards, to the standards that the individual law firm or lawyer or in-house team might reasonably expect of you? Those are all indicators of being set up properly as well. So there's the finance side of things, there's the structure of your organization, there's what you've put in place in terms of your governance and standards for your product outside of how it actually works itself. And all of these are factors that come into play when you're assessing whether a supplier is mature enough and capable enough to recommend them to law firms to use. Not an easy judgment call to make in many respects, particularly if you're trying to be helpful to startup tech and you want to give them a platform to build their business and get that track record. So there's a bit of chicken and egg going on with that. But I think for tech providers, you have to be mindful that these are the questions that are being asked. These are the things that are being considered about your business. It's not just the shiny lights of what your product's able to do. We're going to look under the hood, not just at the app itself, but what you're like as a business, what your prospects are as a business. And any lawyer is going to do that if they've got the time to do it. What we do is try and reach the smaller lawyers who haven't got the time to do that. The further up the chain you go, the more scrutiny you're going to get from each and every individual customer. What we try to do is cut that down so that we've done an adequate level of security for multiple lawyers to rely upon. It's interesting from my perspective that most startups go for the big contracts first, and each of those contracts could eat up months of their time and get them no track record. So they're aiming for the big name to get them the credibility of working with that big name, but it's not getting them the track record that they could be getting if they were working with multiple smaller names for that same 6-month period that they've been negotiating with the one big name. And it's a challenge because the pressure is on to get the biggest return for your piece of tech as you possibly can, as quickly as possible. And logically, that is to go to the big guys, get the biggest contract you can get. But I think don't overlook that you need to build up a track record with somebody and get somebody on board as soon as you can. Then maybe switch to focusing your marketing team's efforts onto the big guys. But I think there is a market out there that will serve a purpose for you and that is underserved currently by tech providers that shouldn't be overlooked.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point because I've seen that firsthand where you see a legal tech company that starts out serving SMB customers or mid-market, but they all eventually converge, or at least many of them eventually converge on enterprise because there's this idea that everybody needs to focus on the enterprise segment of the market. It's like, well, no, there are still smaller companies, there are still smaller firms. They need solutions too, and they're willing to pay for them if you're willing to be a partner for them. And I think
Yep.
there are two sides to that coin where not just from the vendor's perspective, but also from the buyer's perspective. You don't have to go out and spend $100,000 on one tech solution. Like you can if it's one that you trust and it solves your problems. But what if you start with something much smaller? You talked earlier about not necessarily going out and finding one platform that promises to do everything and doesn't necessarily do any of it all that well. What if you find that one solution that solves one problem that you already have really well? And the nice thing is, if you're looking at, say, point solutions, modular solutions, they're not always going to cost as much as this holistic end-to-end enterprise-grade platform. So even if you are a big buyer, a big firm, a big company, maybe you don't start with a $100,000 contract or even a $40,000 contract with a provider that's untested. Maybe you give them the chance to show what they can do, but with a smaller contract where you're just starting on one workflow, one office, one
Yeah.
document type, and go from there.
Yeah. We work with people from the very smallest product that might cost £25 a month, something like that, right up to a contracts for an entire AI system, which I've seen people spend tens of millions on. See clients spend tens of millions on. And a lot of the principles around what's right for your law firm apply to that entire range.
Yeah.
It's about identifying what the pinch point is, what's going to work and bring the most benefit for the best value as quickly as possible. And I think the problem with the panacea AI solutions is that they don't promise anything tangible and understandable immediately. Actually, something that's a web portal that'll give me a report of some sort that I can just do in 10 minutes. But before that used to take me 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah.
That's the easiest sell in the world to make because you're telling somebody, these are admin jobs that you can't charge a client for. They're just a total waste of your time and money. And nobody thanks you for doing it anyway. But you're doing the compliance function or you're doing something in the background that the client never sees and never appreciates. Let's get those out of the way because those are billable hours that you can use somewhere else. Not forgetting, of course, that there's a finite amount of deep legal thinking that somebody can do in a single day. So, we don't want to suggest that a lawyer can replace a lot of the administrative tasks that they're doing entirely with deep strategic legal thinking. That's not possible. If that was possible, then it would already have been done to an extent, I think, or you would have the brilliant brain who sits in the room doing all of the deep thinking and nothing else but that already in a kind of biological manner. It just isn't possible. It's not the way we're built as humans. We need the admin tasks and the slightly routine things because often what we're doing while we're doing those things is thinking through the problems over a longer period of time. We're not doing concentrated thinking and problem solving all of the time. And that, I think, is something that lawyers and tech people need to think about a little bit more is what actually do we want to achieve from the adoption of tech? Do we want to make every hour billable and the highest quality billable time that we can justify to the client in every single way? And if we do that, does that make that billable hour more expensive? Is it even a billable hour anymore? I mean, that's a huge debate at the moment is, are we charging in a way that isn't sustainable anymore? Do we have to have new chargeable models? But I think we do need to focus on what are we doing when we're introducing tech from a human perspective to that person's day. Sometimes the message that goes out is we'll be able to save you from hiring people, or we'll be able to get you to shed some of the people that you're paying at the moment. That doesn't actually go down very well with a lot of law firms. They don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear that they're a threat to their own profession. If you sell it as something that you don't have to get that external resource that you're not sure about anymore, when you had to get paralegals in to review boxes and boxes of leases or something, That, I think, is something we can understand as humans. We can say, okay, you're actually making me less afraid because I'm adopting your solution, which is reliable, rather than bringing in an unknown human quantity who could be really good or could make loads of mistakes and set us back more than they gain. So I think it's a really important thing to just keep an eye on what that means to us in the workplace, what the technology means to us in the workplace, what it means in terms of human interaction within our workplace, as well as the value proposition. The value proposition, very, very important, but we are still always human. We care about our colleagues. We don't want to bin them. We get an awful lot out of developing our younger colleagues' skills as well.
Yeah.
And there are parts of our job that are not necessarily always appreciated by people from outside of the profession. You don't see. Actually, there are people within law firms who get most of their job satisfaction through transferring skills to up-and-coming lawyers, developing their careers and helping them along their way. I've been a training principal in the past. I've led teams. I get a huge amount of satisfaction out of that. And if that's removed from the role, do you even want to do it anymore? If all we do is the deep thinking, the deep legal thinking and strategizing and so on, do you even want to do that? Because that might not actually be as satisfying for as many people as many of the other aspects of the role that aren't considered, as I say. So we often have these sort of conversations about the balance between technology and human input. What's missing from AI? Well, things like emotion, things like morals, because morals are always moving with the thoughts of society at any given point in time. And AI cannot replicate that. It cannot think in that way. It cannot do that, despite what some people might claim. It isn't capable of doing that.
Yeah.
If we don't balance those and keep with those things in mind when we're talking about adoption of tech, we don't keep the empathy with the client that we're trying to sell something to, then they're not going to engage and they're not going to like what's being presented to them. And they may even turn away a solution that would be perfect for their business just because they don't like the way that it's being presented.
Yeah, it's a fantastic point. And then there are a couple sides to it again. So many legal tech solutions are being touted as being an AI lawyer or being an intern. And yeah, to your point, if I hear this is an AI version of you, it's like, oh, great. So you're planning on replacing me with an AI, a bot basically that replicates my outputs. Fantastic. That really makes me want to buy it. And then the other point, yeah, like even if you say, okay, well, it's not an AI lawyer, it's an AI intern. Well, what happens to your actual interns then? And when do they get a chance to do the work and learn the same way you did? And yeah, that's something I've been hearing a lot about and talking with people about. For one thing, it's both vital to your business, to your team, to train the next generation of talent, make sure that you have people who are coming in who are learning your business and your processes and can take things over time. And also, you make a great point. Some people like the human connection. Most people don't want to just, in any line of work, just go into work and produce a pile of documents or whatever the output looks like. You know, it could be code, it could be medical diagnoses, but whatever your profession is, you're not just your outputs. You're not just your work product. There's a whole profession there. And so, not just in terms of what the tech does, but in terms of how you're talking about it. Are you talking about it in a way that people can relate and say, yeah, this is good. I can see myself using this and getting more satisfaction out of my work instead of just putting myself out of a job within 5 years.
That's absolutely it. I think you put that very, very well. When we look at tech solutions, and particularly the most advanced tech solutions, we can see the capability, but do we want the capability? Or do we actually want tools that augment what we already do? And I think I would lean towards the latter, that actually people want things that augment the work that they already do, not things that replace what they already do. That's where you get trust issues for a start. And from a technical perspective, you get trust issues. But we just aren't, I think, in a position where we're comfortable. We have enough track record of employing some of the latest technology to trust it enough to give it a free rein within our businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that is our experience with the wider world. So, if you use a banking chatbot that drives you mad. You think, why would I want a chatbot in my business? It's going to drive my customers mad. Never mind that that chatbot is probably about to be replaced by something much, much better. The fact is that you've got that legacy experience in the wider world, and you think, I don't know, do I want to do that? Is there a risk associated with doing that? So when we talk about assessing the risk of things and how we are happy to incorporate different types of technology into our lives and into our business, we look at the whole spectrum of what's around us. If we see massive problems with technology that's being deployed by the very wealthiest organizations, that's going to make us really cautious about what we adopt in our little business that could be knocked for six by the same sort of problems.
Yeah, so this has been fantastic. We've delved really deep into a lot of the issues that have built up that trust gap. So we've looked at not just the functionality of the tech, but is the design user-centric? Is it informed by what practicing lawyers and legal teams need to do every day? Do you have the tech architecture to support it and make it reliable and resilient? Do you have the business foundation to make sure that the potential buyers can trust you'll still be around in a year, in 2 years? You're in a prime position to answer this next question then. We know where the trust gap comes from. How do we solve it in a systematic way?
I think having middlemen is a very useful way of addressing that sort of gap. In every other industry, there is a wholesaler, a retailer, and a customer. And there's a very good reason for that. There's a quote about farmers markets that I love in that respect. People say, isn't it funny how when you remove the middleman, the cost goes up? So that's the first thing that people see in terms of the value that middlemen bring. It's the power to negotiate on behalf of multiple people and aggregate a solution that's suitable for more people. Retailers and middlemen benefit everybody because they bring access to more customers for the providers. They save them from having to answer the same questions multiple times. And so they cut down on their onboarding significantly. They cut down on their marketing significantly because it's passed on to the middleman to do and leaves them to concentrate on their own business. But that middleman has to be performing the right function. If you're selling cars, you don't go to a supermarket and ask them to sell your cars for you. You go to the people with the expertise in that area. Ideally, you are dealing with middlemen who have relevant experience. So as a reseller, from my perspective, I've been 25 years as a lawyer. I speak the language on one side. And on the other side, I've been a developer and I've been a reviewer of AI products. And I speak not fluently, but plenty of tech language to be able to say, okay, this is the concern on this side. How you can address this, and I've seen this addressed before, is this. How do we make this work for not just two parties, but multiple parties so that we can facilitate a marketplace for both and get a clarity of purpose of the app, a better understanding of the support available, and a better understanding from the user's perspective of what they're getting into. All of those things are perfectly possible. To date, what I think I've seen more of is things like larger organizations insisting, and that's one or two I won't name, they insist that all of their sales teams are legally trained. That's interesting in a way, but it doesn't solve the middleman issue of putting somebody in between who is representing both interests and balancing out those interests. It is also something that only works jurisdiction by jurisdiction. So there's a temptation, I think, for US vendors to say, well, we've put US qualified lawyers in. We'll use them to sell to the UK, for example. It doesn't quite work because they're very different legal systems with very different cultures in terms of how we engage with our clients, different regulation. So I think it isn't so easy, even for the biggest vendors, to solve that problem just by employing support staff who are legally qualified. I think you do need an interface between the two, somebody who knows both sides of the coin and can act as a translator or an interpreter between one and the other.
Again, it's really intriguing points there. One is that I think as a vendor, you absolutely do need lawyers on your team. Partly it's informing product development, which features you're going to use, how would lawyers actually use the feature. You talked about the user interface. Are you using the right words? Or are you using words that a designer would use or that an engineer would use and that lawyers would not use to describe what they do? So there is that element. And if you have lawyers on your sales team, or even, I've worked in legal tech marketing on your marketing team, you can talk to lawyers in terms that they use. But, I'm a US qualified lawyer. I can't necessarily talk to a UK qualified lawyer about law the way they think about it and the way they were trained with it. They were educated differently. They were licensed differently. They practiced differently, to your point. That concept of outsourcing, the combination of the due diligence that we talked about and some of the communication that we talked about, where you have somebody who can really translate between the two. Yeah, I can see that being a really appealing aspect for both sides, both the vendors who are trying to do a better job of connecting with potential buyers and the legal teams who are looking at this whole legal tech landscape and seeing hundreds of vendors, many of whom frankly look pretty similar to each other, and trying to figure out, well, who's actually going to help me, who, if anybody, is going to help me do my work better from day to day? Which vendors can I trust? Which solutions actually plug into my existing processes and will support my team?
Yeah, there are lots of important points in there. A key thing that maybe we haven't covered as much as we might have done in the things that we've talked about up until now is involving lawyers in the development of your product.
Mm-hmm.
And maintaining that involvement as you continue to develop and maintain your product in the marketplace. If you lose track of who your customer is somewhere along that way, you're going to miss a lot of the best customers in the market for your product. Even as we set up as middlemen, as I say, or retailers, or however you like to describe the way that we do things, we run focus groups with lawyers, and we ask them what they want and how we can improve. And we do it constantly. If we get a hint that a provider is not doing that, it's difficult for us to recommend them as a solution to our customers because they're not doing what we do. They're not doing what we think is best practice in the market.
Yeah, I've worked with several legal tech companies, and I've seen you grow and you bring in senior leaders from other industries, and that's great. You can get some great additional perspective and some skills and some experience to draw on that can be a great part of helping your business grow and your product develop. But I've also seen that sometimes those external leaders come in and maybe they don't really get legal tech, and frankly, some of them don't entirely want to be working in it. They think you should go and serve different audiences. Maybe they're not even interested in selling to lawyers or to legal ops managers. So I like your point about maintaining that involvement of lawyers, whether it's your employees or you're running focus groups, like you said. Are you making sure that you're still keeping that core customer base front and center and keeping their needs in mind, even as you do expand and you bring in more and more team members who may not be all that intimately familiar with what lawyers deal with every day?
Yeah, absolutely. Keep your finger on the pulse.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Exactly. So James, do you have any anonymized, of course, success stories you can share with some of the clients you've worked with and how this middleman approach has benefited them?
We've got a pretty wide range of people that we act for, from people who spend £25 a month on a solution through to multiples of millions, tens of millions. And the common theme across the board for all of them is that our success stories, because of the nature of our target audience, are in identifying those pain points and matching to an appropriate solution. And the best thing about being in the middle of that arrangement is that you get the satisfaction of finding the right solution for somebody, and you get the satisfaction of helping that tech business to develop their customer base too. So to me, success is finding vendors who understand our aims to simplify tech and break down barriers to adoption, to level up and make tech more accessible to smaller volume users. We talked earlier on about startups who target the higher volume users, the bigger ticket contracts, but in doing so miss a much larger marketplace below that could be operating as they're building up their track record much sooner. We work with vendors to break down those minimum volume requirements and resell them to multiple smaller users. And I think leveling up in that respect, giving those smaller volume users access to the same tech as the big guys, to give them the opportunity to remain competitive in the marketplace and in some respects stay in the market, keep their business alive I think that is success to us. That is definitely where we feel we bring something essential to the marketplace that isn't really there at the moment. It's not unusual in other resale of technology, of software. It's not that unusual, but it's really underserved in the legal marketplace because there isn't that connection. It has to be done by lawyers. You've got lawyers as customers. You've got to have lawyers somewhere in the development and the running of your tech solution. And you've got to have lawyers translating between the two and putting one in contact with the other to make it all work. So yeah, as an example of something like that, if we can introduce a due diligence solution that takes a client with complex companies or high net worth individuals as their clients and get them to a point of confidence in doing their due diligence that they are going to be adhering to the highest standards of compliance, that they're going to have picked up everything that's out there in their due diligence exercise and been able to interrogate the results, the outputs of that due diligence report in a way that will enable them to get comfort that that client is somebody that they should onboard in the first place, but also know that they can answer any questions that will be brought to them in the future about whether they did the right things at the right time. If we can give people comfort by enabling them to adopt a piece of tech with a very specific solution like that, then we've done our job.
Yeah, and I like that point you added at the end there, that it's not just about initially mapping out a process and saying this is a tech solution you can use for it. There's also the check-in later. Are you implementing things well along the way? Are things still going well? Are you taking the right successive steps? So yeah, I love that that's a part of your focus. It's not just set it and forget it, because that's not how this works. It's really making sure that they're building in a sustainable way.
Yeah, absolutely. This is about assisting people along the way to ensure that their business continues to grow, working as a partner with both sides, the lawyers and the tech providers, to ensure that both of them have a sustainable business model. Both of them are adopting the best methods, and from the lawyer's perspective, the best technology suited to their business at the minimal disruption, the minimal adoption barriers, and the maximum impact upon their business.
Well, this has been fantastic. Now, I do like to spend a little time at the end of the show stepping away from legal tech and AI and talking about something a little more casual. I call this segment Keeping It Human. So, James, what's your non-AI adjacent fact or
yeah,
share with us?
completely non-AI, unless you go down a rabbit hole of how content's being misused by AI and scraped from the internet. But I'm a big fan of books. I read a lot of books. I like my analog lifestyle as well as my digital lifestyle. And at this time of the year, I'm always thinking about, should I be reading a Stephen King or something like that? Halloween just around the corner. And the book I always think of at this time of year is Dracula. And you think, well, what link has Dracula actually got to Halloween? Halloween is a festival originated in the Celtic nations, Ireland, Scotland, and the country I'm from, the Isle of Man. And we share the same language in different versions, originally versions of Gaelic in the Gaelic family of languages. So the link, I guess, Halloween is the old start of the Celtic winter. But Dracula is all based in England and Romania. So what's the link? The link, one is the obvious one. Bram Stoker was Irish. The second is there is a little bit of Gaelic at the very, very start of Bram Stoker's Dracula. And it's in the dedication. He was big friends with a very, very popular author called Sir Hall Caine, Sir Thomas Hall Caine, who lived in the Isle of Man. So the two of them had some Gaelic background. And the dedication is written to Hommybeg. A Hommybeg is Gaelic for Little Tom. So there's your link between Dracula and Halloween. Quite obscure, but there is one.
No, that's great. I was not expecting 6 degrees of separation between Dracula and Halloween and Ireland. That's fantastic. I appreciate that. So, James, this has been great. I've enjoyed the conversation. If people would like to get in touch with you, to talk legal tech or to possibly look for a professional middleman who can help them with their own legal tech journey and implementation, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, the best ways to get in touch with us are by email at hello@teare1.com. That's TEAREONE.com. Take a look at our website. That's it, really. Email us, take a look at our website, you'll find us.
Fantastic. hello@teare1.com. So thank you, James. Great conversation as always. And thank you everyone who joined us today. Please don't be a stranger. Get in touch with James if you're looking for some guidance. And of course, thelegaltechguide.com is your home for all things legal tech. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much.
That's it for this episode of The Future of Law is Today. Subscribe for more straight talk on law and legal tech. And share it with someone who still thinks Master of Laws when you say LLM. Thanks for listening.